Kum len and a black gemara. It's Chagigah other Beis. We are up to in Masechta Daf Beis Amud Aleph. We'll just go over the last few lines. So basically, the Mishnah said you cannot, when it comes to kachim, one of the stringencies of kachim are that you cannot immerse two kalim, one inside the other one. And we had two opinions as to why. We had Rava who said the reason is the Rava who said that the reason why you cannot have is because we're worried that if you put one keli inside another keli, next time you're going to put inside a bottle that has a very narrow neck, less than the width of two fingers that you can turn around easily. And by kachim, we are very machmer. So therefore, you can't even use a normal keli. And the other one says the problem is chatzitza. One keli sitting on top of the other keli might be a chatzitza. When it comes to everything else, we're not worried because the keli lifts up, the water lifts it up. But with kachim, we have the extra stringency. And we said the difference between two opinions are if you have a basket. A large basket never has a narrow opening, it's porous. So according to Rabbi, there's no issue then having a keli inside the basket, even for kachim. And according to the other opinion, no, it's still a problem. It's still a problem because one keli sits on top of the other keli, and those parts that there's two layers. The water doesn't, it intercepts the water. And then we said another rule. We said, when do we say that it's a problem? Only if the outer keli is tahor. So therefore, all we're trying to do is to cleanse or is to put in mikveh, immerse the inner kalim, but the inner kalim might be in a bottle that's narrower than the neck. However, if the outer keli is tameh, it doesn't matter if the neck is very narrow. It doesn't matter if you have needles inside and so on, because since the outer keli becoming tahor, then everything there becomes tahor with it. It's one unit, and therefore it's not an issue. So this is the last thing we learned. So just the mission again that we learned. Right in the middle of the page, the last word line is kalim. So this is the mission that we learned to prove that there's a distinction between whether the outer keli is tahor or the outer keli is tameh. But now we learned kalim shemilan kalim daf chav beis amud aleph, the middle of the page. We learned in the Mishnah kalim that you filled it up with other kalim inside. Then you immerse them in the mikveh. Harei elu tahorin, they are all tahor. But v'im, what do you mean they're all tahor? We just learned before that if you put a keli inside a keli, it's not tahor. So as Rashi explains, we're talking about truma here. For truma, it's not an issue. Our mission is only talking about kachim when we are concerned. But we're not talking about where you actually don't let the water in. We're talking about the water gets in, but we're concerned when it comes to kachim, not when it comes to truma. The im loy tavel, and if you didn't immerse it, and the Gemara explains what that means, or the way the Bach learns, umayim hamaravi, you want to mix two mixtures together. The waters of the two mixtures to join together, so that if you consider one, you'll have enough of 40 so. You need that there should be a cavity between the two, a hole, the width of the tube, which we said before, the 2 fingers. Might come up. What do you mean if you didn't immerse? If you didn't immerse, I don't talk about. It means the im l'tava. What do you mean l'tava? Hachkamar. The im ain't l'tzarich l'bil. In other words, if the outer keli, if you don't have to table the outer one because it's tahor. If you do have to table the outer one because it's tameh, then no problem. We make no distinction how narrow, how wide the opening is, because since the outer keli is becoming tahor, the migui, since the outer one comes tahor, then everything inside is like one unit, everything becomes tahor. But if the outer one doesn't require tefillah, the outer one is tahor, it's not tameh at all, it is tahor. Or in the case of mayim hamarav, you want to mix two mix together. Then you have to make sure that the opening is wide enough so that that if you want to put things inside a bottle, you have to make sure it's a wide enough opening. You put 2 fingers inside. Says the Gemara, this argument of Rabbeinu, whether the reason is because chatzitz or whether the reason is because we want to make sure that Gzeira, next time you put it into a bottle with a very narrow neck, is actually an argument of 2 tonight. The Tanya we learned, Sal v'gargusi, these large baskets and the sieve. Shemilan kalim, you filled it up with kalim, v'hit bilan, then you immerse them both together in the mikveh. Bein le kodesh, bein le truma tahor. Not only for truma is no problem, even for kodesh is no problem. And why is no problem? It's one keli inside another, because the first opinion says nothing to do with chatzitza. The first opinion says the reason is we're worried about you might use a bottle that has a very narrow neck, but baskets never have a narrow neck. It's wide and open. That's the whole idea of a basket. So therefore, there's no reason to exeris. Even kachim, it's all right putting things inside a basket to table. Abba Shaul says no. The truma, it's all right. Because I hold like Rabbi Ela, which is Rabbi Ela like me, because of chatzitza. And if it's because of chatzitza, we're scared that they're pressing each other and water to get through, then what's the difference of a basket, not a basket? Okay, so now the Gemara continues asking a discussion. If that's what our concern is, If our concern is chatzitza or out, whichever way, or the concern is that next time you use a bottle, narrow neck. So why are we only worried about kachim? Truma nami. Why aren't we worried about truma the same thing? Then maybe one keli will press down the other keli, and there will be a chatzitza, or maybe this, you'll put it in a narrow bottle, very narrow neck. Why are we only worried about kachim, not worried about truma? Says the Gemara. The man coming in, when we talk about truma, who do you think we're talking to? Who's going to come and ask us a shayla? Chaverim. The only ones that the Namarats won't come to ask us a shayla. So who's coming to ask a shayla? Who are we going to tell this halacha to? To a chaver, to a tam chacham. And we're going to tell him, no, don't toivel one keli inside another when it comes to kachim. Amaris will never ask us a question. Therefore, since it's a chaver who's aware of all of these halachas, there's no reason to make a gzera. They know that you cannot press the keli because you cannot be chatzitza, so they're going to make sure that the keli is lifted up. And if it's a heavy keli, they're going to physically lift it up. What are you worried about? And they know you can't have a bottle with a narrow neck, so they'll never put it in the bottle with a narrow neck. So there's no reason to make a gzera because we're talking to Tamid Chacham. Says the Gemara, no. The Gemara said, Chavedim in the other. They know exactly what's going on. So Kaddish Nami, so Kachim the same thing. So when the Mishnah says by Kachim you have to be stricter, who are we talking to there? Of course, we're not talking to the Amoritz because he can listen to us. And he won't even ask us a shayla. Obviously, he's talking to Chacham. So why by Kachim we're talking to Chacham, we don't trust them. We add this layer of Gzeiris, and by Truma we do trust them. What's the difference? Says the Gemara, no, the difference is we're not worried about the Tam Chacham. We're worried about the Chazilei Amoritz. By Kachim, if the Amoritz sees how you deal with Kachim and you put one keli inside another, he'll think you're allowed to do that. Yeah, Matt, but he'll do the same thing. So the Gemara, so how come by Truma you tell me it's a Talmud Chacham? What does that help us? But Amaris will see, and we'll replicate what he saw, and he thinks he's allowed to have one keli inside another keli. You realize there's a problem, and if it's a heavy keli, when you realize you have to pick it up. But he'll be mapped. Says the Gemara, as far as the Amaris is concerned, he's always tummy anyway, so nothing changed. And we will not take truma from him. So therefore, even though the truma might become tummy, we are not going to take it from him. And therefore, not a problem. Only time, as the Rashi tries to point out, that we take from Amaretz is there's a certain period when they open up or they sell all the olives and they open up all the vats and the wine. So then everyone, for business, everyone makes sure that they're 100% Torah. We can trust even Amaretz. They don't want to lose their business. Says the Gemara, so Kachim also. If they bring wine or oil to the base of English, we won't accept from Amaretz because we don't know what they did. We don't know the kalim that they used. If it's tamei, not tamei. What's the difference between truma or kachim? You're telling us you're not worried about the person himself. You're worried about that Amaretz will watch them, observe them. You're not worried about truma because we won't accept the truma from them. No, we won't accept the kachim from them either. Says the Gemara, no. Havila Ava. We introduce a new concept called Ava. We don't want to antagonize them. We don't want to make cause a distinction, and we don't want to cause any enmity. And therefore, we are not if we don't take their kachim, they will donate to the base of English. It'll cause a lot of strife. So if they want to offer a coin truma and refuse to take it because I don't like you, I don't trust you, doesn't that cause Ava as well, animosity? So Gemara says, no, there doesn't. Amar doesn't care. Amar thinks, this guy's an idiot. I'll give it to my cousin or kohen, my friend or kohen, who's an Amar's like me. He doesn't care. So on the contrary, truma doesn't matter. The Ozl Yoel Kohen Aretz Chaver. He can always give it to another kohen. But when it comes to kachim, he can only give it to the kohen serving the Beis Hamikdash, and all the kohen serving the Beis Hamikdash know the rule that you won't take it from Amaretz, and that's a problem. Therefore, we need to make sure that Amaretz won't come to make this mistake. So we need to make sure that everyone knows that kachim are stricter than truma. So even though it comes to truma, let's say the Amaretz is not careful and kalim become tamei and all that, and he immerses two kalim one side another, so we can't trust his kalim. But he knows kachim is stricter, and if he brings kachim to the Beis Hamikdash, he knows will be queried what he did. So therefore, they'll make sure they do it right in the first place, because there's no alternative. So the Gemara, who introduces this idea of Ava, that because of Ava, who's the one who says that they introduced the idea of Ava, because of Ava, we change some dinim around. So the Gemara, this follows the view of Rabbi Yosi. The Tanya, we learned, Rabbi Yosi said, why is it that everyone is believed to tell us when it comes to kachim, and anybody brings wine or oil to donate to the Beis Hamikdash, wine from the sachim pouring on the Beis Mizbech, or oil for the flour offering, how do you know you can trust them? Everyone can be trusted. Today, we in order, we don't want people to say, well, they don't want our donations, we're going to build a mizbeach in the backyard. And that's forbidden from the Torah. So therefore, we'll take it, we'll ask them questions and we trust them. So we see because of Ava, because of we're worried that they're going to start like a nation of their own, they're going to do different things. We decided to relax some of the laws, or beside of paradum, make their own paradumas. Not exactly sure how they're going to make their own paradumas, but it's just a rare commodity, as the Gemara says. We had, so difficult to find a paraduma, but nevertheless, they'll make believe they have a paraduma. They don't know the laws about one black hair, two black hairs, and they'll start another religion. We can't have that. So what is he from here? That Ava is an issue. Furthermore, and behind what's Abiyasi, the continues. How do you know that you accept testimony from an Amoritz today? We learned from Abiyasi. What's the story? Because Abiyasi is the one who says that we relax the laws of Kachim in order not to start another religion. Rav Papa uses that and says, therefore, we also relax the laws that we can accept the testimony from Amoritz, even though because we don't want they should start another religion. We don't want to make a divide, a split in the Jewish nation. So we see Ava is an issue. And our Mishnah follows Rabbi Yeshi. So you can go further. Okay. So you answered me, we have another problem. Let's go back to the original thing. That by Truma also we should not allow a chaver to merge to Kalim. And because maybe an Amoritz will see. And you told me we're not worried at all because Amoritz, we don't accept the Truma from Amoritz because we don't know what kind of Kalim, how they table it, and it's not a problem because Amoritz will give it just to another Kohen Amoritz. In fact, what do I need the headaches for? What do I give to a rabbi for? I'll give it to another Kohen Amoritz. But we know that people used to borrow Kalim from each other. We know that even Chaverim would borrow Kalim from an Amoritz. Why are you worried about the Kalim itself? How can you borrow a Kalim from Amoritz? Maybe they immerse two Kalim together. The Neches, L'Shaila, why aren't you worried about borrowing and that the Chaver will use it? Okay, you told me about the food itself. They won't accept it, but you used to borrow Kalim. How do they borrow Kalim? Now we learned. Klicheres matzah. We learned an interesting discussion between Reisil and B'Shamai. We learned at klicheres earthenware. Now earthenware can only become tummy internally. You can't in the abe from the airspace. It cannot become tummy from the outside. So if you have a klicheres and food inside, sealed, and inside a house with a corpse, it doesn't become tummy because the klicheres guards everything that's internal, does not become tummy. So too, if somebody's upstairs and a mace is downstairs and you have a skylight between the two, and you block it with this klicheres, it blocks, it intercepts the tummy, it doesn't pass through it because a klicheres does not become tummy from the outside. Metal keli will become tummy from the outside, and therefore the keli itself will become tummy. How can it protect what's inside from tummy or upstairs? It itself is tummy, it just continues to pass on the tummy. So klei cheres, earthenware, matzal ala protects everything. Food inside, anything. Comes on Bisham, he says, no, it depends what's inside this vessel. Only the food and drink inside the barrel does it protect. Or there's earthenware inside, that's it. But other things inside the barrel, they will become tamei. Now, what's the logic in Beis Shammai? If it protects, it protects. If it doesn't protect, it doesn't protect. How can you make a distinction between food and drink and earthenware? But you'll notice that what's in common between food and drink and earthenware, that if it becomes tamei, there's nothing you can do to remove the tumor. If it's metal, kalim, or clothing, you can just take them and immerse them in the mikveh and make them tar. So Beis Shammai agrees. Beis Shammai says, machmer, those things, you know what? It won't protect them. It's only food and drink and klechedes that has no solution, that has no way of removing it. We're going to be machmer. So Beis Hillel didn't understand that point. So Beis Shammai, I don't understand. He said to him, I don't understand. Sorry. What's your logic? This food and drink and klechedes is not tamei, everything else is tamei. Why? So Omru Lehem Beis Shammai responded, This keli was already tamei. No, the klecheres itself, we believe that the Amoritz owns this klecheres. It itself is already tamei. So therefore, how can it block the tumor from the corpse from going up there or what's inside? So that's what the first answer was. I believe that anything that's in the possession of Amoritz is tamei. So this klicheres already was tamei before even he put it to block that hole or put things inside it. So therefore, what protection is it? So Beis Hillel says, if so, how does it protect food and drink? Amr Beis Hillel, sorry. So Amr Beis Hillel, when he said food and drink is all right. How can food and drink all right if it's sealed? But you're saying the keli is already tamei. How can it protect the food and drink inside? Beis Shammai said, I'll explain to you, said Beis Shammai. When it comes to the food and drink that's inside the barrel, we never take food and drink from an Amoritz. All we are saying to the Amaretz, you can eat the food and drink. And why not? The Amaretz himself is tummy anyway. So who cares if food and drink is tummy and not tummy? It doesn't make a difference. What about a chaver? No chaver will eat food from an Amaretz, as we learned throughout Shas. Right? We're always so careful that a woman shouldn't eat with Amaretz or dough. We're very careful. So as far as we're concerned, we're not going to eat it. He is tummy anyway. Who cares? Avol. If we're going to say that the kalim inside the barrel are all right, what's going to happen then? We're going to borrow it one day, and we're going to be using tamid again. That affects us. So we see clearly from Beishamai's response that we used to borrow kalim from an Amaretz. And as Gemara said further, Tanya, we learned about this conversation. Oh, Rabbi Shua said a couple of generations later, he went after Beishamai passed away, and he said, Beishamai, I'm embarrassed from what you said. It absolutely doesn't make sense. I'll tell you, I'll give you a hechetimtzu, which doesn't make sense. Here, take this for example. If it's possible, according to you, Beishamai, Isha Losha Ba'areba, a woman standing there kneading on a kneading board. So you're going to tell me, Isha Ba'areba, since the woman and the Areba, the kneading board, they're tummy. They're tummy. And the food is torah. But Shiva, and not only the tummy for 7 days, if there's a mace there, right? If there's a mace in the house, whatever it is, there's a mace downstairs and they're upstairs and they're kneading upstairs and there's a barrel that's in between. So the woman itself is tummy as if the mace touched them. What happens when a mace in oil? You're tummy for 7 days. So she has to now wait 7 days. The kneading board has to wait 7 days. But the dough that she made, you said food is tired. It doesn't make sense. Or let's say I have legan, a barrel more than full of wine is legan. The barrel is tamei to Mashiach because it wasn't protected by the earthenware that was protected. So the barrel that's upstairs becomes tamei 7 days. But a mashkin, the wine inside is tahir. Doesn't make sense. So he says, I'm embarrassed of your opinion. It absolutely doesn't make sense. Nitful loy talmid Beishamai. Came along one of the students of Beishamai or a student of a student. Amalei said to him, you don't understand? Let me explain to you. Let me tell you, time was Shabbat. Let me give you the logic of Beishamai. Amalei Emar. So Bishur said, look, I'm ready to listen. What is it? Amalei said to him, I'll tell you. Clay tamei. Let me ask you a question. If the keli itself is tamei, can it block the tumah of the corpse from going upstairs if you put a kli tamei in that, let's say, window? Of course not. How can it be intercepting when it itself is tamei? It just becomes a conduit for tumah. That's the next question. Says this Talmud. Keli shalama aretz tamei tar. What do we presume? The keli of an ama aretz are generally tamei, or are they tar? Tamei. Generally, we assume that they are tamei. Then he said to him, and if you tell the Amma Oretz that your Kelim are tamei, klum mashgiach alecha, will he listen to you? He thinks it's tar. He doesn't know all the intricacies and complex laws of Tumah Tara, and he thinks that it's tar. If he's telling you it's tar, he thinks it is. So will he listen to you when you tell him, by the way, my friend, your Keli is tamei? Now, of course he won't listen to you. So therefore, Beishamai decided, since he won't listen anyway, I'll tell you what. For as far as the Amoris is concerned, the food and drink and a klei cheres that has no remedy, I'm going to tell him it's tar. It doesn't affect anybody anyway, because nobody's going to borrow a klei cheres or food and drink from an Amoris. So that's not a problem. So therefore, I'm not worried. Because they won't listen anyway. So just tell them their tamei and doesn't make a difference. We're not going to borrow from them, makes no difference. However, normal kalim that can go to the mikveh, and we do borrow, we have to tell them that it's tamei, because then the Amaris won't make a big deal out of it. He'll just go into, it's no big deal. We'll go to the mikveh and immerse it, and that's it. He'll listen to you. He won't listen to you when there's no remedy. You tell me it's a problem, and I have to destroy it. I'm not going to throw my food out, toss away my earthenware, because you cannot travel earthenware. You have to break it. No. And furthermore, and he'll retort to you and he'll say, if you tell him, you're Kelim Atame and he thinks it's tar, he'll tell me, on the contrary, Shali tar, Shalcha Tame. What are you hack to China? You're the one who's Tame, I'm tar. That's a lot of Beishamai. Beishamai is being very practical. And the fact that Basil later on changed his mind and agreed with Beishamai. Miyad immediately, Halach Rabbi Shur went, he went to the graveside of Beishamai, Omar, and he said to Beishamai, I owe you, Beishamai. Kach, things which don't make sense, actually are very logical. Surely the things which openly you give a logic to it, surely you have a lot of merit. There's a lot of merit to what you're saying. Amru, they said, Kol Yama, the rest of the life of Rabbi Shua. And he's kept on fasting to Jews because he spoke out so harshly against Beis Shammai. The rest of his life, he fasted to do tshuva for embarrassing or insulting Beis Shammai. Interesting. Tony Mias, we learned, however, clearly from this, what's the point to bring this whole Mishnah down? We learned clearly, L'cha v'loy, that what this affects you and me. In other words, they used to borrow from Amaret. So our question goes back. What do you tell me, Truma? There's no problem in immersing one keli in another, and even Amaret sees you, and they put food in there, you're not going to take the food from them. What about the keli itself? Since we borrow the keli, the keli might be tummy. Alma Shalina Muhunai, we borrow from them. Says it's not a problem. Even when we borrow a keli from Amaretz, every chaver knows to take the keli and immerse it just in case. When we borrow from them, we table it, so it's not a problem. Because we taka worried, maybe they put one keli in another. We don't bother asking them because they don't know these intricacies. We just take it and don't make a big deal, and we immerse it. We don't borrow klei cheres because we can't fix it up. It's only klei shetif, metal and other kind of keli. So nahadulu beisil beishamai. So why didn't then Beis Hillel answer Beis Shammai? Because then Beis Hillel conceded and relented to Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel should have said to Beis Shammai, because Beis Shammai said, "Look, you're going to borrow a kelim." So Beis Hillel should have said, "No big deal, because we tabled it anyway." Beis Hillel could have gotten out of this argument. Why didn't he? He could have just said, "Look, it's not a problem. You're making a distinction between food and drink and other kelim. We don't care about other kelim either, because we'll table it anyway." And that remains a question. Says he went further. Tommy Mays, boy Hazor Gimel V'Zayin. Somebody who's Tommy Mays needs to be sprinkled on the third and seventh day, right? We learned about Paraduma. The third and seventh day you get sprinkled before you go to mikveh and Harasham and all that, you become tar. Sorry. And the reason why Beis Hillel, the more answer, the reason why Beis Hillel didn't answer Beis Shammai that we borrow, because the case of Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, not talking about our Gemara, we're not talking about a tummy mace. Our Gemara is talking about that he became tummy, he touched it. All you need is 24 hours and Heroshems. In the case of Beis Hillel Shammai, there's a corpse downstairs and you're upstairs, and you put this clay cheres in the hole there to block between the upstairs and the downstairs. Over there, if something becomes tummy, it becomes tummy for 7 days. People, when they borrow, they don't borrow normally a keli for 7 days. You buy it for a day, you borrow for a night. People didn't have a large dish, pots and pans, and all these kind of things. So therefore, says the Gemara, Beis Hillel couldn't answer Beis Shammai. So Gemara does answer. Beis Hillel couldn't answer Beis Shammai that no, it's not a problem either for keli because we're going to table it. No, table's not enough. You have to wait 7 days, get it sprinkled by the paraduma, and generally speaking, people don't borrow keli such a long period of time, and therefore it's a drama, it's an issue, and it'll affect us. And that's why I had to make this rule. Nobody lends a keli for 7 days. Says the Gemara, you tell me you borrow from Amaretz, you have to table the keli yourself. In other words, even though the Amaretz says, yeah, it's 100% all right, I tabled it, we don't trust the Amaretz, and we table ourselves. Why? But Tanya, didn't we learn that we learned, but Tanya, we learned that the Amaretz are believed when it comes to they say that, look, we were tummy mace, but we went to the mikveh. So we see we do believe in Amaretz when it comes to going to the mikveh. So why can't we believe when they say we immerse the kelim in the mikveh? Everything is good. So you want to buy look kasha. There's a big difference. When Amaretz talks about himself, we believe him. When he talks about a kelim, we don't think he takes it that seriously, and therefore we don't trust him that he did it correctly. Rava says, even gave both cases no matter his utensil kasha. He says, I never ever put one keli inside another keli. We believe him. We don't think he's a liar. We believe him, and therefore that's the second mission. But if he said I did table kelim in the kelim, but I was very careful to make sure that the kelim were always wider. The neck was always wider than the width of a tube. That already we don't believe him. If he says he did it, we don't believe he knows all the intricate halachas, always that meticulous, and therefore we don't trust him. That we don't believe him. Says the Gemara, because Tanya, we tackle it. But I should support that. Neman Amaretz and Amaretz will just say, pay this lehuchshu. He will just say, look, these fruits never became tamid because they were never prepared. They never got wet. He's not believed to say, pay this huchshu. Yes, the paydas got wet, but you should know, I was very careful to make sure that it become tamid. Once he agrees that it became susceptible to tumid, there are so many intricate rules, we don't believe he knows all the rules. We don't trust him. Same thing here. Says the Gemara, about Gufim and you Abai said, that we trust him when it comes to his personal self. That he went to the mikveh. Tanya, didn't we learn chaver shebola haza is if a chaver comes to the Beis Hamikdash to get sprinkled by the paraduma mazin, and he said, look. Today's my third day. We trust him. Mazin Allah miyad, we'll spray him straight away, even though he just came, because we'll trust him as the third day. But if Amma Oretz Bolahazis, if Amma Oretz comes to be sprinkled, Ain Mazin, we don't trust him that today's the third day. We wait 3 days before we sprinkle him. So we see that we don't believe him when it comes to his personal self to see whether he redid the Torah properly. Elam Rabbi says, no, you don't understand the point. The point is, because of this chumrah that we have, if he comes along and says, look, I touched a dead body, or I was in the same room as a dead body, we say, look, we don't trust you that you already counted 3 days. You're going to have to start again now. And the third day we are going to sprinkle on you. Therefore, because he sees how strict we take it, is hekalta Allah b'sefer. After the 7 days, and then he comes along and says, look, I went to the mikveh, we trust him. Because he really sees how stringent it is. The Mishnah continues saying also, we said in the Mishnah also that one of the chumras in the thing was that there are different cavities inside a keli. So the keli is made up of different parts. If one part becomes tummy, the rest don't automatically become tummy, but by kachim it does. Says the Gemara, the back, the inside, my acharayim v'tayich. What do you mean? Now, what's exactly the case of it? And we learned if a keli became tummy in the back, let's say a metal keli or wooden keli, not talking about earthenware. Earthenware does not become tummy from the outside, but let's say the keli became tummy externally through drink. Now we know drink cannot be matami a keli. Drink can only matame other food and drink. Only a sheretz or a person, only an avhatuma can be matame a keli. However, the Rabbanan said that if mashkin touch the keli, it will become tamei mid the Rabbanan, because there is one kind of mashkin, one kind of liquid that could be contaminated keli. That is the roik, the saliva of a zav or a zava. So therefore, all mashkin is matame a keli. However, or is urine. So therefore, because only the Rabbanan, we decided to make one difference here so that people will know it's Rabbanan. It's important for people to know if the Tumah is the Rabbanan or the Raisa. Why is that? If Truma comes in contact with it, if it's only the Rabbanan, we're not going to burn it. You're not allowed to burn Truma. But if it's Tamei Mahatayda, then you're supposed to burn it. So you need to know, remember, if this Tumah, what level of Tumah this is, the Rabbanan or the Raisa. And therefore, we made a rule of what? If you touch it, if let's say mashkin touches from the outside, only the outside becomes tummy and not the inside. So they can it further. What is it? Only the outside is tummy. The inside, let's say the rim, the handles or yod, if it's a long handle, if it's just an air, they remain Torah. Deliberately remain Torah, because then people will remember it's only Tamei Midrabanan. But if the inside becomes Tamei, then even though it's only Tamei Midrabanan, then Kula Tamei, the whole thing becomes Tamei. So we're only Machmer when it comes to Kachim, that if any part of it is Tamei, the whole thing is Tamei. Says Gemara, what exactly Beis HaTzvita? One of the areas that we can collect, liquids we say. Isn't it Beis HaTzvita? What exactly is Beis HaTzvita? Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Makom Shetzayvta, the place where you helps you move the keli about like a handle, and you extend it. This is what you use to when you want to extend the keli to someone else. This is the part that you hold on to. We find by Rus that boy Kelly, he sent her, drew out to her keli. There's toasted wheat, so we see it means extending out, so like a handle that you use to pass from one to another. This is the place where people who are very particular and very fastidious. This is the, let's say if they want to dip, so they don't just put it in the plate together with all the other food. They have a separate compartment where they place the whatever the condiment is, and they dip it there. So and that is a part of a keli that has like a groove, and that's what the Beis HaTzvita is. So if that part became tummy, it doesn't extend anywhere else except when it comes to kachim. He says. What do you call it? When it comes to kachim, we just said before, when a keli, you touch any part of the keli, even tum rabbanon, the entire keli becomes tummy, not like truma and everything else that only that region because it's only tum rabbanon. And he says here, echad kachim, whether it's kachim in the base of Mikdash, echad kachim will kachim the rest of Israel. What does that mean? What's kachim ma'ani? What's kachim l'gul? It seems like truma, but Al Mishnah clearly says by truma, if one part of the region of the keli becomes rabbanon, it's limited to that part. And here it says Chagigah, which sounds like Truma. Also, the entire Keli is Tameh. But now the Mishnah Chanaim is Truma. That Truma is all right. That only that section is Tameh. So you must be right. Chagigah does not mean Truma. You know what it means? Dilma lechulin shenasa tarsa kodesh. People all over Israel that would eat. We learned before, eat chulin and treat it as if it was kachim. So whether you do that, whether it's real kachim, we are machmer that one part of the keli becomes tameh, the entire thing is tameh. If he says, now that you say that, at Kart Mills, you reminded me something, which we learned before already. The mission is talking about 11 different stringencies of kachim over truma. The first 6, Bein LeKodesh, Bein LeChulin Shenasa Tara Kodesh, makes no distinction whether it's actual Kodesh or Chulin, which is built in Kodesh. Acharonis, but the last 5 is only limited to Kachim, Avaloi LeChulin Shenasa Tara Kodesh, but not the Chulin, which we learned yesterday. The Mishnah said further, if you carry a shoe, noise es a truma. If you carry a shoe, you're allowed to carry in one hand a shoe, and you're allowed to carry in the other hand a barrel of truma. You cannot hold a barrel of kodesh. The Gemara says kodesh my time alive. Since you're not touching each other, what's the problem? Because an incident of what's happened. There's a story. A person was transporting a barrel of wine of kodesh from one place to another place. And the strap of his sandal tore open. The nuttle, he took it. He put it on the rim of the barrel. Remember, by earthenware, it does not become tameh from the outside. So therefore, there's no problem you carry the barrel. But he put the shoelace on top of the barrel, and then suddenly it fell into the barrel, fell into the airspace of the barrel, and now the barrel became tameh. The nikma became tameh. At that moment, they said, anybody carries a shoe, we're not going to be worried that maybe this is going to happen. It's a rare incident. Even a rare incident is enough for us to be machmer, and we're not going to allow it to happen. And we're talking about a shoelace that even the part that cut off can still be used. Therefore, it still has a status of a keli, and therefore it still generates truma. Very quickly, why don't you worry about truma? The same thing. What's the difference? Truma is also should be a stringency. If it happens, it happens. Says the Gemara, why the wine of truma? We don't care. Says the Gemara, we already had it before that we didn't ban it only when it comes to the yarden. In other words, that means if something happened, we made a gzera, and the case, according to Rav Hanania, has to be exactly like the original case that caused us to make this gzera. So it's only in the Jordan River, only on a ship, and Kamaisha has to be exactly like the story would happen. What's going on? The time we learned. When it comes to mechatas, we learned that we're even stricter than everything else. The person should not transport water of the paraduma you want to mix with the ashes. The eifechatas and the water of the chatas and the ashes. The yavirim biyad, do not cross the Jordan. You want to bring it to the base of Mikdash or Besfina, crossing the yard on the ship. We don't want to go over a river, so you cannot stand on one side of the river and then throw it over to the other side of the river. Don't swim across the water with it. Don't ride on top of an animal. Or on top of the friend's shoulder. The only way to bring it is your feet have to be on the ground because of the story that happened. And the only way to differentiate between the story that happened and what you're doing is if your feet are on the ground rather than you're on a boat or on an animal. You can go across a bridge, even though you're going over the river, because you're walking on the tierra firma. And we're not worried. And he says furthermore, it's not limited to the Jordan, any river. He says no. Also, the only time it's forbidden to transport this water is if you're crossing the Jordan River, not any other river. Ubasfina, only if you went by boat, not if you went by animal or on your friend's shoulder. Exactly like the story. What's the story? The story of the person he was transporting this water of chatas, the ashes, beyarden on the Jordan River, ubasfina on a boat. The nimtza kazayis mace, and then in the hull of the boat somewhere under the same roof cover that you're in, they found a kazayis of a dead body, tochov, that was stuck in bikaka isa shosfin on the floor of the ship. In other words, the water became tummy and the ashes became tummy. Mechatas. They said la yisa od mechatas bevechatas the yavirim biyad. We don't want anybody to transport it this way. According to the Kama, anything which is similar enough, any other river, and it doesn't matter how you're going, as long as you're not on the ground, it is forbidden. And he says, Hanani says, no, only if you follow exactly the same way. So before that story, the shoelace happened with Kachim, we're not going to be applying the same rule to Truma as well, which would come from here. If we the other way around, if the story happened with Truma, we wouldn't apply it to kachim, even though kachim is stricter, because it has to be exactly kemaisa shahaya. Okay, we'll stop here and continue tomorrow. Mr. Shem, I bring the chaydish everybody. Same time.